Hi, I'm Juliet Kemp, and my new book is Shadow and Storm, which is the second book in the Marek series. The first book was The Deep and Shining Dark. The Marek series is an epic fantasy series set in the city-state of Marek. In this scene, I'm going to read, at the start of the book, the sorcerer Cato is talking to his new apprentice Jonas. Jonas occasionally experiences little flashes of the future, but he's from a culture that doesn't hold with anything at all magical. So he came to Marek intending to try to get rid of what he calls his flickers. And instead, he has decided to stay and find out more about what magic he himself can do, but he's still not wholly convinced that that was the right idea. "You are a most impolite apprentice," Cato complained. "A magical apprentice who can't do magic." Jonas folded his arms. "You can," Cato insisted. "Look, have you had any more of those flickers of yours lately?" Jonas absolutely hated talking about the tiny snippets of future vision that he referred to, when he had to refer to them at all, as flickers. He looked away. "Have you?" Cato demanded. "I'm not asking for the fun of it. If you want to do this, I do need a little honesty, or openness, if you prefer." "Two," Jonas said, still staring at the shelf of ingredient jars. One had been the very near future sort, where the flicker barely ended before the thing it predicted. They made Jonas dizzy, but they were handy when playing dice, and they weren't too bothersome. This one had shown him paying for his beer a second or two before he handed over the money, and had led to him dropping coins all over the bar, but that was nothing worth fussing about. The other, though, had shown Cato and someone Jonas didn't recognise, talking quietly in the corner of a bathhouse, Cato looking almost affectionate, and it had come with the ringing in his ears, which usually meant something important. "Oh, yes," Cato said. He leant forwards a little, his eyes alight. "What about, then?" "None of your business," Jonas said. He wouldn't have told Cato about his flickers at all, for choice. He certainly wasn't about to provide any detail, and he felt a bone-deep reluctance to tell Cato that he'd seen anything of Cato's own future. His flickers didn't seem like the sort of thing he should share with their subjects. "Oh, come on," Cato said. "Surely, as a good apprentice—" "I said no," Jonas said, more loudly than he'd intended. Cato's eyebrows went up, as if he were genuinely startled. Then he gave a more theatrical eye roll and shrugged gracefully. "Well, if it's that sort of a subject, then by all means keep your strange secrets. It might help me to work out what's going on here." Jonas didn't believe that for a second. "But I have no intention of insisting. In any case, if they're still happening, then you can't have burnt yourself out with that faradiddle of versos." "Could that happen?" Jonas asked. "Could it have happened, I mean?" He had a horrible feeling that he sounded hopeful. He had an even more horrible feeling that he didn't know whether he was hopeful or not. "I have no idea," Cato said. "The flickers mean that you're coming at this from an unusual angle. Lacking previous data of that specific type, I can't be sure. But there's no records of any other Marek sorcerer burning themselves out, so I hardly think no. I think no, it's not likely." Jonas nodded slowly. His own people, the seafaring Salinas, didn't hold with magic of any sort. Originally, Jonas had come to Marek to look for a sorcerer who could take his flickers away, so he would be able to join a ship. Cato had convinced him. No, that wasn't fair. Jonas had chosen to stay in Marek and try to work with it instead. He'd guessed that decision at least once a day since, but there wouldn't be another Salinas ship in the harbour now until the storm season was over. Another couple of weeks, and he could hop a ship if he wanted. Anyone would take him on for the rest of their voyage and then home. As long as they didn't know about the flickers, that was. "I can still try to take it away, if you want," Cato said, sounding surprisingly gentle. "Thought you said it wouldn't work," Jonas said. "Well, it most likely wouldn't. Not entirely. I could probably teach you to suppress it, but if you're going to do that, you might as well learn to use it first. It's all much the same skill." He looked slightly shifty. "Arguably," he added. "Anyway, if you're not going to tell me about these flickers—" Cato paused very slightly and Jonas glared at him. "We may as well try the summoning spell again." Jonas sighed and picked up a pigeon feather from the desk. He didn't see why it was likely to work now if it hadn't before, but Cato was right. If he was here, he might as well keep trying. He took a pinch of ground ginger, placed it into his cupped left hand, and mixed it with a pinch of wood shavings. "Now," Cato said peaceably, lying back down on his bed, "focusing your mind on what you wish to achieve, and holding the charming Beckett in mind as you make your request." With the tip of the feather, Jonas began to flick the ginger and wood mixture, a little at a time, out of his hand, changing the direction he swept it in each time. He thought of the pigeons outside the window, going about their business, thought of the squats as they looked from the roof, as the pigeons must see them. He thought of Cato's window frame, and where it was in the building, and where the building was in Marek, imagining the city as a pigeon would see it from on high, the river winding through the middle of it, to the south of where he currently stood. He envisaged one of the pigeons flying down towards the building, in towards Cato's windowsill. He placed Beckett, the city angel, the spirit that looked to Marek and made its magic work, in the Marek of his imagination, permeating the city as a half-real, half-imagined presence. And for a fraction of a second he could have sworn he felt Beckett's grave, unmoving regard, saw Beckett in his mind's eye, as Jonas had first met them, confused and part human in a pub. And at the back of it he felt a great frustration boiling in his skull. A frustration with his flickers and with his apparent inability to do this thing that Cato had said he could. It wasn't fair to have one and not the other, not when Cato kept telling him they were connected. A frustration with Beckett, who had brought him to the attention of sorcerers and dragged him into a magical and political confusion that he was still surprised he'd come out of in one piece. A frustration with Cato, lying on the bed watching him with a faint and unconcerned smile. A frustration with this whole damn city and with the Salinas ships whose welcome would sour if they knew what he could do. He clenched his teeth as it built, still thinking of the squats and the city and the pigeons, and flicked the last little bit of the mixture out of the palm of his hand. There was a great fluttering of wings, and pigeons began to pour into the room through the open window. 5, 10, dozens of them crowding into the room as Jonas stared open-mouthed. Cato, shocked out of his lethargy, sat up and mouthed what was undoubtedly a swear word. Pigeons were flapping round his head, feathers everywhere, a claw tangling in his hair then ripping away, and he felt the beginnings of panic. He'd done this, hadn't he? How had he done it? How could he undo it? There was a roaring in his head, a tightening across his skull, and then someone tall and travel-stained climbing out of a window, a Marek window, Jonas knew with inescapable certainty, a bag over their back, anxiety around them like a cloud and the scent of danger. He staggered and almost fell with the dizziness that always accompanied a flicker, just as Cato stood up on the bed, batting pigeons aside with his hands. Through the storm of wings, Jonas saw him make a gesture with one hand, then the other, saying something that Jonas couldn't hear through the noise of the birds. The fluttering died down even as he was saying it, the birds funneling back out through the window as quickly as they'd come in, until the room was silent again. "I thought you needed ingredients to do sorcery," Jonas said inanely, the first thing that came to mind. "You do," Cato said, sitting down back down again, cross-legged. "At least for now, and I generally find them helpful. They provide a focus and a certain amount of energy or power or what have you. But, well, in an emergency, yes?" He took a deep breath. "Takes it out of you, though." And indeed, he did look a trifle worn beneath his mask of casual unconcern. "What happened?" Jonas asked. Had the flicker had anything to do with the magic? With the pigeons? He almost opened his mouth to tell Cato about the flicker, then thought better of it. "Well," Cato drawled, "at a guess, I'd say that you did some magic. Perhaps slightly more magic than we had quite intended. I did say that Beckett might still be quite fond of you." "Fond of me? To send all these birds here?" "You asked for birds, no? Birds were sent." Cato beamed at him. "Now, Jonas, do tell me, just how annoyed were you? At me, perhaps? People often are annoyed at me. I have noticed this in the past, when you did that. I'm thinking, perhaps, very annoyed." Jonas looked at him, sitting cross-legged in the middle of his rumpled bed, feathers still drifting down around him, the bed cover and the floor of the room spattered with bird shit. There was an expression of polite inquiry on his face. Jonas started to laugh. Cato's lips twitched, and then he was laughing too. "Don't worry," Jonas choked through his laughter. "I'm sure I'll be able to get annoyed again." "Happy to help," Cato said, and cackled once more. And that's that. So that's Shadow and Storm. And I hope you enjoyed that bit and if you would like to read further. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.